Hello, friends. Thank you for being here. Each of you makes this channel alive and special. Thanks to your support, I can share stories, thoughts, and emotions that hopefully resonate in your heart. If you have just started exploring my content, welcome. Real-life stories are waiting for you here. Subscribe, like, and share your impressions. Your voice is very important to me. So, my son went and got married without even giving me a heads up. I found out by accident while scrolling through Instagram. There he was, looking sharp in a suit next to his bride in a white gown. I didn't bring it up with him. The next day, kind of as my own private celebration, I sold the house where he used to live. Then, around 3 a.m., my phone started buzzing on my nightstand, waking me up. It wasn't a call, just one of those notifications I can't wrap my head around. I picked up my phone with my right hand, which still hurts now and then from a brick accident 15 years ago. I barely managed to open my eyes and focus on the screen. The Instagram app was up. My granddaughter had set it up for me a couple of months back, saying, "Grandpa, now you can see everyone's photos," and she guided me on how to navigate it. I asked her why I'd need such a thing when I never post pictures of myself, and she giggled, "Grandpa, it's for looking at others' photos, not yours." There I was, wide awake in the stillness of my home, so I decided to open Instagram. The first thing I saw was Simon, my only son, looking dapper in a spiffy navy suit with a gray tie, hair styled perfectly. I was taken aback, wondering when he'd gotten that suit, why he was dressed so well. He never dressed like that for me. As I tapped my way through the pictures, the next one was him holding a woman in a white wedding dress, delicately lace-adorned on the shoulders, with a bouquet of white roses in hand. Simon's gaze was locked on her like she was his world. I blinked a bunch of times, hoping I'd snap out of whatever this was. I'm Thomas Duval, and at 73, here I was, staring at a wedding photo of my son, feeling utterly lost as to how I got here. Swiping further, I spotted her parents. A man pushing 60 in an expensive gray suit with a beaming face, and a woman in a pink dress and pearls, clearly just back from the salon. They were clutching onto my son, smiling as if they'd just hit the lifelong lottery. Right there, in the center, stood Simon, joyful, arms around them. I pulled the phone closer, hoping to catch a glimpse of myself somewhere, even just a reflection. Nothing. Flicking to the next picture, I saw a bunch of folks hoisting champagne glasses in a toast, laughter echoing in a grand hall decked in golden lights and white blooms hanging from the ceiling. It was beautiful, classy. A quick glance at the post's timestamp showed it went up last night at 7:47 p.m. I checked the wall clock, 3:22 a.m. I did some mental math, albeit slowly, as numbers aren't so swift anymore. 8 hours. 8 hours ago, my son had tied the knot. In that span, he promised forever, clinked glasses, cut a cake, danced, all without me. There I was, asleep on my old bed in my small apartment. Not a hint, no call, no invitation, nothing about, "Dad, I'm getting married this Saturday." I dove back into the photos, about 30 of them, everyone. Pictures of the magnificent hall, the main table dressed in white, huge flower arrangements, the pair slicing their cake, guests swirling on the dance floor, Simon spinning his bride amid cheers. My fingers trembled as I zoomed in on each picture, seeking any trace of me, searching for my face, my shadow, but I was nowhere. It felt like my past 45 years with my son had vanished from reality. I was invisible. Then, in the comments, there were hundreds of them. Congratulations poured in. One comment stood out, "The in-laws look so happy." That hit like a punch. In-laws? Sure, they seemed thrilled. Front and center, holding on to him, toasting with him. And me? His father, who gave him life, who worked hard for 4 decades to support him? Not even a mention. I kept scrolling. "He sure got lucky with a family like that," read another. A family like that. A family I wasn't part of. One that welcomed them and left me on the outside. Holding that phone, something in me cracked. It wasn't quite pain, not yet, More like confusion, disbelief, a dense fog I couldn't see through. You know that eerie sensation, being wide awake in a nightmare you can't seem to shake off. Just the other day, I found myself glancing at the calendar once more. It was like a slap in the face realizing that my son was piecing everything together just under 24 hours ago. Only a few days earlier, he was adjusting that suit, and not even a month ago, he was sending out those invites. Yet throughout all that planning, spanning days, weeks, months, never did it occur to him to say, "Hey Dad, I'm getting hitched." I let out a heavy sigh, flipped my phone down onto the table, but picked it back up just seconds later. I needed another look at those photos, whether I believed them or not, to wrap my head around the fact that my own son tied the knot without breathing a word to me. In one picture, the one with the toast, I noticed the tables and did the math. 8 tables, each with 10 seats, equals 80 guests. 80 people who were there with every right, all informed about the nuptials before his dear old dad. There were Simon's co-workers, the bride's friends, uncles, cousins, neighbors, everyone except me. I live in this small apartment in Bella Vista. It has a kitchen I barely touch because, really, what's the point of cooking for one? The living room has this old armchair where I spend my afternoons watching TV, though half the time, I'm not even watching. You see, I've been a widower for 5 years after losing my wife to cancer. During her last miserable 18 months, my son visited all of 3 times. I spent 4 decades working construction, wrestling with bricks and mortar, until my body waved the white flag. And now, there's my son. A son who got hitched last night without giving me a heads up. A son who erased me like an old mistake best forgotten. A son who unknowingly taught me that no matter what you invest, if a vital person decides you're obsolete, then you are. I left the phone deserted on the table, headed to bed, and leaned against the chilly wall. Tears didn't come at first. I just sat there in the dark, eyes wide open, seeing nothing. From outside came a far-off dog's bark, the hum of a car engine driving by, and the thick silence of the night's end when everyone else is deep in dreams, and you're left alone with a hurting heart. I pondered calling him, grabbing the phone again, dialing, waiting for his voice so I could ask, "Why, son? Why'd you leave me out?" But I didn't, because deep down, I already knew the answer. He simply didn't want me in that chapter of his life. That night, I didn't sob. Sure, my eyes stung, my throat felt tight, but tears never fell. Maybe they had all dried up. Perhaps I poured them all out in that hospital by my wife's side when my son wasn't answering his calls. Or maybe the pain was just too massive to transform into tears, bigger than emotions. Instead, it felt like a void, an empty space in my chest where my son's love once lived. I didn't cry, but inside something shifted, something fundamental that had kept me afloat so far. By the time the first rays of dawn filtered through my window at 6 a.m., I knew I wasn't the same person anymore. My wife Lucy left this world on an April Tuesday at 4:37 in the afternoon. Her hand was in mine as she drew her final breath. Those same hands, once robust, whipping up meals, sewing, tenderly brushing my face after exhausting days, grew cold as I held them. For half an hour I refused to let go, knowing that releasing them would mean accepting Lucy was really gone. Cancer ravaged her across a grueling 1.5-year fight, with treatments hitting dead ends and pain laughing off the morphine meant to ease it. I stuck by her side, every day, vowing she wouldn't face death alone. Simon finally made it that dire day, arriving an hour late at 5:30. The scent of office work hung on him, and his suit bore the signs of a rushed exit. "Sorry, Dad. Traffic was terrible," he mumbled. For the past 3 days, Lucy had been asking about him. "Where's Simon?" She'd murmur each time she gained a little awareness, her voice fragile. I lied, telling her, "He's coming, darling. He's on his way." But he wasn't, not really. My calls went ignored, and when I messaged saying his mom wanted to see him, the responses came hours later. On my way, caught in an important meeting. A meeting more pressing than bidding farewell to a mother with moments left. And when he did finally arrive, Lucy was too far gone to recognize him or utter a word. Imagine me sitting on the bed next to her, gently resting my hand on her forehead, while tears poured down my cheeks for what seemed like forever. Just 5 minutes, though. In the middle of it, he hugged me tightly and whispered, "I'm so sorry, Dad." And just like that, he was gone. He's got things he needs to do, and life keeps rolling on. I spent 40 years working on construction sites. I started when I was 17, coming in fresh from the countryside without any know-how except for lifting heavy stuff and doing what I was told. "Hey, kid, get those bricks up to the 3rd floor," they'd yell. So I'd drag myself up and down in the blazing summer heat that could fry an egg on the ground. When winter hit, it was the freezing rain I had to deal with. No gloves for me, because buying them wasn't an option back then, and helmets weren't common either. Just me, my back, my arms, motivated by the simple need to feed the family. I hung up my hard hat at 57, defeated by my knees. Those relentless backaches each morning made getting out of bed feel like a mighty struggle. 40 years of stacking bricks, mixing cement, building walls. All of that dedication summed up in one word. Simon. You should really check out my hands. Go on, take a look. They're basically a roadmap of scars. See how my index finger is all crooked? That happened when a beam crashed down while we were setting up scaffolding. This enormous callus right here in my palm, that's from gripping a shovel more times than I could count. My hands are carved with lines that speak to a life of hard work. They've never signed off on a big paycheck, never held a degree, never caressed anything fragile. They just toiled. They just provided. They built the life Simon now enjoys. Every time he settles into that office chair, with the air conditioning softly humming, sipping a cup of piping hot coffee, his hands clean and untouched, I hope he thinks about these weathered hands that earned him those chances. When Simon was just a little kid, about 7, he came home from school in tears because some kids were picking on him. "Dad, I don't have sneakers like theirs," he said, cheeks burning with embarrassment. His sneakers were cheap ones from the discount section, 2 sizes too big to make them last longer, with logos peeling off. Seeing him like that broke my heart. "Tomorrow, you'll have new sneakers," I assured him. That night, I picked up extra hours, clocking out at 2 a.m., completely worn out. But the next day, we hit the shoe store, and I let him choose the white Nikes with the sleek black stripe. They cost me half a paycheck, but the sheer happiness on his face, watching him zoom around in those sneakers, made every extra hour, every ache, and every penny worth it. I spent 25 years saving to buy a house, a long, patient 25-year journey of stashing away cash in a coffee can in the closet. Each month, I'd slip in whatever I could spare. Sometimes it was $100, other times just $50. Some months, only $20 made it in because Simon needed school supplies, new clothes, or money for a field trip. But I never skipped a month. Not ever. While my co-workers splurged on cars, I stuck to my trusty bike. When they vacationed by the sea, I stayed put and held fast. "Not going anywhere this summer, Thomas?" they'd ask. "No, not this year," I'd reply, even though truth was, I never went anywhere at all. Each dollar saved brought me closer to owning that house. Finally, after all those years, I took all the savings out in cash from the bank. That moment is seared in my memory, the teller giving me a strange look as I asked for it all in bills. "That's a lot of cash, sir," he warned. "I don't care," I replied, stuffing that money into an old backpack and striding over to the real estate office, gripping it like my life depended on it. So I was checking out this house in a suburb of Queensland. It was nothing fancy, a 1-bedroom place with a patio so tiny it could barely hold a dinner table. The walls were crying out for new paint, the bathroom had a leak, and the kitchen tiles were all busted up. But for some reason, it felt right for me. The real estate agent looked at me and asked, "Do you want it?" Staring at the house, I imagined Simon, my son, safe under that roof. "Yes," I replied. Without a second thought, I dumped the cash from my backpack onto his desk. It took him a good half hour to count it all, but eventually he handed me the keys. Flash forward to when Simon turned 28. He had just finished his degree in engineering and landed his first steady job, but he was paying through the nose for rent in the city. At the same time, I had cozied myself into a smaller, cheaper place, perfect for just me. One day, I had him over. The keys were there, lying on the kitchen table when he walked in. "Have a seat," I said. He plopped down, looking confused. I nudged the keys his way. "What's this, Dad?" he wondered aloud. "Your house," I told him. "I got it with my savings. It's yours now, so you won't have to worry again." A little later, I was about to meet Valerie, Simon's girlfriend, for the first time. Approaching her, I wondered if my handshake might be a bit too much, so I awkwardly shoved my hands into my pockets instead. Breaking the tension, Simon suggested we grab a seat. I went for a plain black coffee, while they chose these fancy Italian drinks that I could hardly pronounce. Valerie barely spoke to me during the whole thing, and when she did, it was all short, clipped answers. She seemed more interested in Simon handling the conversation. After finishing our coffees, Simon said they needed to head off. "We should do this again, Dad," he said, looking hopeful. I nodded, all the while feeling a knot in my stomach. Valerie simply gave a polite, "Thanks for the coffee," and they were gone. Watching them leave, arm in arm, I stood there alone in that pricey cafe. The door closed, and it hit me. This was more than a simple goodbye. It was a slow parting from the center of my son's world and into his new life with Valerie. Back home, the silence was deafening. What I had once hoped would be filled with family noise and laughter was now just me, with memories of what was. Days rolled into weeks and then months, and Simon's visits dwindled to nearly nothing. When he did call, it felt like a chore for him, rather than him actually wanting to catch up. The house grew dustier and quieter, as my life became more and more like something left behind. Lying awake one night, staring at the ceiling, I couldn't shake Simon's past promise from my mind. "I'll never let you down, Dad, I promise." Yet there I was, stuck between moments gone by and a future that kept slipping away. "So, Valerie, what do you do for work?" I asked. "Business administration," she shot back, short and sweet. "Nice. Where at?" "My father's company." We stumbled into silence then, the awkward kind. Simon tried to fill it by chatting about his job, the weather, or whatever TV shows were in vogue. I just nodded, smiled, and tried to act like I belonged, though I felt like a ghost no one noticed. When we wrapped things up and I offered to pay the bill, Simon practically snatched my wallet, insisting, "No, Dad, I've got this." Valerie gave him a nod like, "Way to go." From then on, the dynamic with Simon shifted. His visits turned into drive-bys. Before Valerie, Sundays were all about us. We'd sip on coffee, watch football, and just talk endlessly. But once she stepped in, he'd stop by for an hour tops, always with one eye on the clock. "Sorry, Dad, Valerie's waiting," he'd say. Initially, I didn't say much. I got it. He was crazy about her, wanting to spend all his time with her. But then it dawned on me. It wasn't just about love. She seemed like she wasn't too keen on our bonding either. Every minute with me felt like a negative mark on Simon's record. One day, I mustered the courage to ask, "So, how's Valerie? When are we going to see each other again?" He dodged with, "She's good. You should meet her folks sometime. They're interesting." That comment hit me hard, like I needed introducing, like I was a stranger, not his dad. A pattern started to form. On the phone, his voice dropped to a whisper. "Can we talk later, Dad? I'm with Valerie. he'd say, but he rarely called back. My texts would get a delayed, half-hearted reply. Sure, Dad. Later. There was a day I planned a special lunch. I cooked chicken fried steak, exactly how his mom used to, with homemade mashed potatoes on the side. I even set the table extra nice. Excitedly, I called him up. Hey son, lunch is ready. Are you coming over? The line went quiet before he replied. I can't, Dad. Valerie wants to eat with her family. I clutched the phone, staring at our dining table. What about me? I asked, my voice breaking despite my efforts. Aren't I family too? There was a long pause before he eventually said, Maybe another day, Dad, and hung up. I ended up eating alone, just me and the dinner I'd meant to share with him. The steak, the way Lucy made it, tasted hollow. The only sound was the clinking of my silverware. For the first time in 2 years since Valerie walked into his life, a scary thought slipped in. My son wasn't just drifting away, he was deliberately leaving me behind. Every week, interactions felt shorter, tense, and when he did show up, he seemed different. Gone were the days he'd kick back, shoes off, like old times. Instead, he lingered by the door, ready to jet. Our talks skimmed over life, never delving deep. I swallowed my urge to ask, What happened to us, son? Where did I mess up? But I stayed mum, afraid of facing the truth that deep down I might already know. One evening, I decided to drop by with a cake for his birthday. It was his favorite, tres leches. As I reached his place, music blared from inside. I stood there, cake in hand, feeling like it was the only connection left. Happy birthday, son, I said, trying to mask the lump in my throat. I made you a cake. He glanced at it, then at me. Thanks, Dad, but you really didn't have to. I could tell by his tone this wasn't what I hoped for. A knot tightened in my gut. I thought you'd like a surprise, I added. Like old times, just celebrating together. He paused, looking toward the house, likely hearing Valerie's voice calling him. Dad, this is more of a thing with friends, Valerie's family. It was clear. I didn't fit into his new world mix. Oh, I uttered, swallowing my disappointment. I didn't realize. He eyed the cake again. Really appreciate it, he said, but his eyes said otherwise. Maybe another day, we can catch up? That little glimmer of hope I had when I started my walk just disappeared like a puff of smoke. Yeah, Simon, some other time, I mumbled, my voice barely there. I couldn't stick around any longer, so I turned on my heel. Happy birthday, I tossed over my shoulder, trying to sound genuine. I headed back home, still holding the cake, each step making it feel heavier. The street stretched out, longer than it seemed on the way there. Each footfall echoed in my brain, mixed with laughter I wasn't part of. It was as if I was coming to grips with the idea that I wasn't part of his life anymore. When I got back home, I placed the cake on the table. My little apartment felt more empty than ever. I stared at that cake, which once symbolized hope and love, now just a reminder of a connection that seemed to grow weaker with each missed moment. I plopped down with a heavy sigh, thinking about my son, the same little boy who once ran eagerly into my arms, not caring about my calloused hands or our modest home. But time marches on, people change, priorities rearrange. Still, I held onto a sliver of hope that, in some way, I'd still mean something to him someday. The words hung between us, like an accusation. Why are you here? He said it more like a statement than a question, almost like he was saying, You shouldn't have shown up. I held up the cake, attempting a smile, pretending everything was all right. Just wanted to see you, son. I whipped up your favorite, the tres leches. Remember how much you dug it? Simon glanced at the cake, then at me, before casting a look back over his shoulder into the house, like he was weighing something in his mind. I sneaked a peek past him too, and what I saw just crushed me. There was Valerie, looking stunning in her sleek black dress, mixing with a crowd. His in-laws lounging on the couch, the very same one I helped him pick out, sipping champagne. Fancy snacks on trays, sparkling glasses, soft music floating around, everyone dressed up, all polished and perfumed. And there I was, in old jeans, a plaid shirt, scuffed shoes, holding a homemade cake with slightly crooked lettering. It felt so inadequate, downright sad. "Thanks, Dad," was all Simon said. Without waiting for me to respond, he took the cake, hesitated for a second, and then placed it on the porch floor like it was something to quickly dispose of. "We're in the middle of something right now. I'll call you later, all right?" He stepped back as the door started to close. I stood there, frozen, with empty hands now, my mouth open, but nothing coming out. "Simon, But before I could finish, the door closed right in my face. Right there, facing his dad. The same dad who'd trudged over with a cake filled with love. He shut the door, leaving me alone on the porch of the house I'd given him. I don't know how long I stood there, staring at that closed door, listening to the sounds bleeding through. Laughter, music, glasses clinking, people shouting, "Happy birthday," clearly not directed at me. Looking down, I saw the cake, sitting there, a corner crushed. Part of me thought about picking it up and taking it back, but I couldn't. It felt like if I bent down to get that cake, I'd just crumble right there. Instead, I turned and walked away. Slowly at first, then faster until I was almost running, eyes watering, throat tight, hands empty. If this story reaches you, it'd mean a lot if you could drop a comment saying where you're from. Just knowing there's someone out there who understands would help me keep moving forward. I retraced those 8 blocks back to my place, eyes on the ground, hoping desperately that no one I knew would catch a glimpse of me like this. I didn't want to explain to anyone how my own son shut the door on me, treated me like some door-to-door salesman, leaving my cake on the floor like it didn't matter. So, back at my own place, I just plopped down on the couch with no lights on and really no appetite for dinner. I didn't bother turning on the TV or doing much of anything, to be honest. I just sat there, shrouded in darkness, replaying that recent encounter over and over in my mind. I recalled the precise moment when he spotted me, the flash of fear in his eyes, the way he swiftly grabbed the cake and placed it on the ground, shutting the door quickly, like he was desperate to hide me from sight, ashamed even. The hardest pill to swallow wasn't really when the door closed. It was realizing there were about 80 folks inside, all there celebrating my son. Colleagues, Valerie's crew, his in-laws, the whole extended family, everyone except me. The very person who raised him solo after his mother left us. I was the one who worked tirelessly for years to provide him the home where he now denied me entry. As I sat there in my dimly lit living room that October day, I couldn't hide from the truth anymore. Simon was embarrassed by me, the working man's hands, simple attire, unpolished speech, and my no-frills way of living. I didn't fit in with his new crowd, the elegant family of his wealthy girlfriend, their fancy champagne, and gentle music. To him, I was a leftover from another time, best kept in the shadows, forgotten piece by piece at each event, until I was gone for good. In the hush of my living room, a certain shift occurred within me. Sadness? No, it was more than that. This new feeling wasn't entirely clear at first, but deep down, I sensed it was about to take root and lead the way. After my birthday, something vital just slipped away quietly, not in a loud, tear-filled venting session or anything. It was more like a resigned acceptance, a quiet end. I began ticking off the days with a glossy bakery calendar, one with saints' days and moon cycles. Every day that passed without a word from Simon got a fresh red line drawn with a marker. At first, it felt a bit silly, like something a grumpy old guy might do. But I needed that visual proof, something to see that his silence wasn't just in my head. Soon, the first week had 2 lines, the following week had 5, and by the third, it was 7. The marking continued, the red lines multiplying, 12 days, then 18, then 23. My calendar filled up, each mark silently screaming that, to Simon, I didn't exist. Mornings, I'd sip my coffee, gaze at that calendar, and mentally add up the tally. 31 full days slipped by without a single call from him. Not one check-in, not even a simple, "Hey, how's it going, Dad?" One whole month, as if I simply wasn't there for him. The worst part? I didn't reach out myself either. My fears held me back, fears of bothering him, or hearing another, "I'm just busy, Dad." Worse still, I worried he'd confirm my nagging fear that I'd become a burden. But eventually, enough was enough. On a particular Wednesday, with 23 days behind me, I craved just to hear his voice. Even a short 2-minute chat would do. So I dialed his number, memorized long ago, and listened to the rings go through. "Hey, Dad." The hurried tone was so familiar. I asked him, "How have you been, son? Feels like forever since we talked." What followed was silence and street noises. "Yeah, Dad, I've just been jammed at work. Is there something you need?" The words stung. They made it sound like the only reason I'd call was to ask for something, as if missing my son wasn't reason enough. "No, son, just checking in." "I'm okay. Everything's fine. Gotta hop into a meeting. Talk soon." And there it was again, the familiar empty promise he'd mastered. "I'll call later." But again, the call never came. More days ticked by. 4, 5, 6, each marked with that darned red line. Sitting there, I would watch the phone, hoping it'd ring. But only telemarketers rang with clouded promises. "Mr. Duval, could we interest you in a better internet plan?" "No thanks," I'd sigh, hanging up with more frustration. Lately, I'd become that sad sack waiting hopelessly for his child to acknowledge him. I hated myself for it, but breaking the habit felt impossible. So, while I was just hanging around, I came down with something. It started with a headache, then got worse with chills, and before I knew it, I had a full-on fever. I used Lucy's old thermometer from the medicine cabinet to check, 101 degrees. I thought hitting the hay with a couple of pills would sort me out, but no luck. Next morning, I woke up with the fever climbing to 102, my body aching in ways I'd never felt. Even my bones seemed to be complaining. Just getting to the bathroom was like tackling Everest, with my knees trembling and my head all woozy. I crawled back to bed, shivering like a leaf in the wind. As I lay there, my feverish mind fuzzy and the heat radiating off me, it dawned on me. I needed some help. With shaking hands, I called Simon. It was a Thursday, around 11 in the morning. I figured he'd be at work, but hoped if I told him I was under the weather, he'd swing by, maybe bring some food and keep me company for a bit. After 6 rings, he finally answered. "Dad." He sounded slightly annoyed. I could hear voices and laughter in the background. I said, "Son," barely managing a whisper. "I'm really sick. High fever, I'm alone." "Dad, I can't." "I'm at a work lunch," he started, but I couldn't hold back. "Son, I feel terrible, please. Just make some tea, rest up. If it gets worse, go to the hospital, all right? I really can't, but I'll call later." And before I could say another word, he hung up. I just stood there, phone in hand, feeling even emptier than before. I kept staring at the dim screen of my phone, struggling to process it. "Make some tea," he'd said, almost like a hot cuppa could magically fix everything, like I was just a kid with a cold, not a 73-year-old man battling a fever, completely alone. I set the phone down and retreated into bed. My fever just kept climbing, 103, then 104. I started seeing things, shadows twirling on the ceiling, whispers I couldn't quite catch. I even thought Lucy was there at one point, sitting at the end of the bed, stroking my forehead like she did when I'd been sick. "It's okay, Thomas, it'll pass." But when I reached out, nothing was there. For 3 days, I was stuck in that feverish haze, only getting up to shuffle to the bathroom or sip some water. I didn't eat. I just couldn't manage it. Grabbing a glass of water and crawling back to bed felt like moving mountains. The fridge only had expired yogurt and some stale bread. No one knew I was sick. Not a single person checked in or knocked. During those isolating days, I honestly thought I might just die right there, unnoticed until the neighbors started to notice something off. And weirdly enough, a part of me found that prospect not all that scary. Come day 4, and finally, the fever broke. I woke up drenched in sweat, but could finally think straight. I gingerly got to my feet and made it to the bathroom. The mirror showed me someone I hardly recognized, looking like I'd aged 10 years in a matter of days. After a long, hot shower to wash away all that fear and sweat, I slipped into clean clothes, made myself some tea, and managed a piece of toast. Once I felt up to it, I dialed my son, Simon, again. I needed him to know what I went through, maybe not to guilt him, but just so he knew. On the 3rd ring, he answered. "Dad," he said. "Simon, I've been ringing you. I was really sick. A crazy fever, couldn't eat or even move all by myself." He cut me off, as if I were merely stating it sunny. "Glad you're better, Dad. I'm in the middle of something important. Can we chat later?" His voice was devoid of concern, guilt, any emotion, really. Just going through the motions, likely eager to end the call. "Simon, it was really tough on me. I thought, Dad, I really need to go. We'll catch up later." And with that, he hung up before I could finish my sentence. Didn't ask what happened, didn't offer to stop by. Nothing, just cut the line. There I was, staring numbly at my phone and the lukewarm cup of tea I'd forgotten on the table. My mind was spinning. I'd spent 40 years raising my son alone after his mom passed away, busting my hump to make sure he had a good life, and even pulled off giving him his own place. But now, it seemed like none of that mattered to him. To him, I was just an annoying obligation, the old man who called too often because I craved attention he seemed unwilling to give. The hard-to-swallow truth was that he hadn't really figured out how to cut me off completely without feeling guilty. Gradually, call after call, through lengthy silences, I was fading away, reduced to just another contact in his phone that popped up with calls he didn't want. Then 2 months went by, and Martha from upstairs swung by. She's a widow too, around 60, occasionally dropping in with a homemade stew or ready for a good chat over coffee. Well, this time she came in with a big grin and her phone in hand. "Mr. Thomas, you on Instagram yet?" she asked. I shrugged. The app was on my phone because my granddaughter had put it there, but I'd never made sense of it myself. Martha plopped down next to me and said, "Here, let me teach you. It's pretty simple. You can see what's happening with your family and friends. Kinda nice, don't you think?" She started walking me through the steps, finding people, looking at pictures, even how to like things. I nodded, trying to catch on, but truth be told, it was all a bit much until she said, "Hey, why don't you look up your son? That way, you'll be in the loop about what he's doing." Once she left, I sat there pondering over her suggestion, still clutching my phone. I was gripping my phone, stuck on the idea of checking out the online version of my son's life. Curiosity had its claws in me. Nearly 2 months had passed since we'd had a real face-to-face, and it had been almost a month without a decent conversation. Our last real exchange was when he breezed through a quick call while I was feeling under the weather. So maybe Instagram could provide me a glimpse, just a hint of where he was, who he spent time with, that sort of thing. I opened the app, went to the search bar just as Martha had shown me, and typed in his name, Simon Duval. His profile popped up, flaunting a photo of him all smiles with sunglasses on some faraway beach. A little hesitant, I tapped his name to see more but got thrown a curveball. His page was locked down, 0 photos, nothing accessible. My own son hiding his life behind digital walls I couldn't see past. Felt like a fool, like I was peeking into something I shouldn't, but the urge to know more won out. So, I hopped back into the app and whipped up a fresh profile. I ditched my real info, choosing a random alias, Peter Towers. For the profile pic, I snagged a generic landscape photo online, a picture that wouldn't raise any eyebrows. With my cover set, I went back on the app, found Simon, and tossed a friend request his way from my new, not-so-real persona. I brushed it off and made dinner, feeling a twinge of embarrassment. Was I really playing detective on my own son, disguised as someone else? Seemed kind of ridiculous, but there was this itch to know, to see what had drawn his attention away, making me feel so sidelined. First thing the next morning, I reached for my phone. My heart gave a little leap. Simon had actually accepted. Peter Towers was in. I plunged straight into his profile, swept away by the flood of photos. There were hundreds. I started scrolling, each image a snapshot of a life I'd missed witnessing. Simon dining in style with Valerie, taking sunny beach selfies with her, laughing over barbecue grills at his in-laws. Birthday parties filled with faces I didn't recognize. Post after post, it was clear he was living a life out of my sight and knowledge. Then, suddenly, wedding pictures came into view. They were just a couple of days old, laid out for all to see. My scrolling thumb paused. A whole wedding right there. Simon sharp in his suit, Valerie dazzling in her white gown. Everything looked so polished. The venue, the decorations, the joyous crowd. I was completely floored when I realized my son had gotten hitched without so much as a heads up to me. Checked the date. It was already the 16th, and they'd said their vows back on the 14th. I spent a while going through comments, full of well-wishers and praise for the wedding. There was even talk of a shindig that happened yesterday, with the formal bit 3 days ago, and all the frills just after. It hit me hard that my kid managed to pull off this entire extravaganza without me catching wind of it. Months, maybe even more, planning out the biggest day of his life. Yet, not a peep my way. Not even a quick call to say, "Guess what, Dad? I'm tying the knot." And here I was, playing detective with a fake Instagram account, piecing it all together after the fact. Who'd I become? Some washed-up old guy sneaking through his own son's social media just for a clue on his life. Kept scrolling through those congratulatory messages, searching for a sliver of solace, a hint that my feelings were understandable, that it wasn't out of the ordinary. Hundreds of comments pouring love over the newlyweds and the party. Then I came across a comment from my son's father-in-law, a dude I'd seen in the party snaps, welcoming Simon into their family with a touching, "We're so proud of you." Simon's reply, a simple heart emoji. And then a last jab, a note from the mother-in-law, saying he finally had people who were worthy of him. "We love you so much," she wrote. "The kind of family you deserve. Can you believe that?" It was like I was suddenly unworthy, like the decades I spent raising him on my own meant zero. There I was, hands shaking, scrolling through the wedding photos one by one. On edge, hoping to find a nod to me somewhere, a thank you to his old man who couldn't be there, or any sign of recognition. But nope, nothing. It was as if I'd been erased from the entire occasion. Heck, like I'd been wiped right out of his life, to be honest. I zoomed into those reception pics, thinking maybe I'd spot myself on the fringe or some obscure table, convincing myself perhaps I got an invite but simply spaced it. Nope, no dice. Counted the tables, 10 of them with 10 folks each, a solid 100 people who apparently deserved a share of the day more than his own dad did. I stayed glued to that couch while day turned to night, letting the room get dark without bothering to switch on a light or think about dinner. Just kept staring at those friggin' photos, hoping some revelation would spring out if I just looked long enough. But there was nothing to discover. Clear as day, my son had scrubbed me out of his life. He put me aside for his in-laws, the ones now somehow cast as his new parents. Valerie had his full attention, and me? I was just the outdated bit of his past he'd had enough of. I wasn't hurting anymore. It was deeper than that, a dead certainty. No matter how much I gave him, what I sacrificed, or how fiercely I cared, it wasn't enough. Ever feel invisible to the very people who are supposed to hold you close? If that rings a bell, hit subscribe here. You're not the only one feeling this punch in the gut. Plenty know what it's like to become a non-entity to those they love. I put down my phone and just sat there in silence, the only sounds coming from outside, the usual hum of passing cars and a dog barking off somewhere. Life carried on, indifferent to my pain. And for the first time, I wasn't craving affection. I wasn't hoping for my son to recall my existence. I didn't want to soak up any more of that continuous sting of being pushed away or erased. Something shifted within me that night, got tougher. Because forgetting is one thing, but being swapped out is something else. And my son's choice to swap me out, well, that's beyond words. It wasn't enough to leave me out of his wedding. He'd stumbled upon a pair of shiny new parents. Parents with money, status, a swanky house, and smooth talks. Parents who didn't remind him of his gritty beginnings or that comfort was built from an old man's hard work. I found myself alone in my tiny apartment, looking at pictures of the family he chose over me. A family where I just didn't fit and never would. I wasn't the dad anymore, just a memory he managed to erase. But he forgot one thing. The house he'd move into with his new wife was still mine. I didn't call Simon for 3 days, just stared at my phone, ready to dial, but stopping myself each time. I had my reasons, or maybe excuses. Maybe he thought I was still sick, or maybe it was just a little ceremony with a big family party to come. Deep down, I knew I was avoiding the truth. He'd left me out on purpose. It wasn't an accident. It was a choice. But I had to hear him say that. On the 4th day, I woke up breathless at 5 a.m. Had a dream about Lucy. She was young, like on our wedding day, sitting on the edge of my bed and softly telling me, "You need to ask him." And then I was awake, knowing what I had to do. Even if it hurt me, I needed to hear from him that he got married. So I wandered around my kitchen, clock ticking, coffee in hand, fiddling with my phone. Too early to call at 6:30, so I waited. Watched the hours tick by. 9, then 10, then 11. By 11:20, I couldn't wait any longer. My hands were shaking as I dialed. As the phone rang, my nerves went wild. Once, twice, 3 times, 4, I was sure I'd land in voicemail land. But on the 5th ring, he answered. "Son," I said, my voice all unsteady. Cleared my throat to try again. "Son, we need to talk." "Dad," he said, "I'm on my honeymoon. Can't talk now." Honeymoon, like a sucker punch. A wedding, a celebration, and I wasn't there. "Just 2 minutes," I pleaded. He sighed. I could hear voices in the background, probably his wife Valerie speaking to him. He muted the call to reply to her. When he came back, it was all reluctant obedience. "Okay, make it quick." I took a deep breath. I'd seen his wedding on Instagram, but I needed to hear it from him. "You got married?" I asked, already knowing. But I needed to hear a yes. And he gave it to me, just a plain yes, offering nothing more. "So why didn't you tell me?" I asked, my voice cracking with hurt. "It was something intimate, Dad," Simon said. I clung to that word. Maybe it wasn't grand, just them and a judge. Maybe the photos weren't the whole truth. "Intimate?" I echoed, trying to stay calm. "I saw the photos, Simon. About 80 people with flowers everywhere, catering, a photographer, music. That wasn't intimate. That was a big party, and I wasn't invited." Silence dragged on. I imagined him, likely in a beachside hotel, annoyed at his dad ruining honeymoon peace. "Dad, don't," he finally said, sounding worn out. "I've got to go." But I wasn't giving up. "No," I said firmly, surprising myself. "I need to know why. Why wasn't I at your wedding?" He raised his voice just a little, sounding frustrated. "What, Dad? Why?" "I'm your father, Simon," I said, desperation creeping in. "I raised you after your mom died, worked all my life for you, and you get married and don't even give me a reason why?" The silence that followed was deafening. I heard the ocean in the background, seagulls calling, people's distant laughter. "Because I had a feeling this was coming," he finally admitted, sounding utterly exhausted and defeated. "You'd kick up a fuss, make me feel terrible, and just spoil everything with your over-the-top reactions." I was stunned, struggling to process his words. My over-the-top reactions? I barely managed to get my response out. "Simon, you excluded me from one of the most significant events in your life, and I'm the one overreacting?" He shot back defensively. "I wanted my day to be perfect, Dad. No issues, no complications. And you, well, you always bring complications." Hearing that hit me hard. Complications? Was that what I'd become after all the years spent raising him, after all I'd given up? I needed to be sure I'd caught it right. "A complication?" "Yeah," he retorted, his patience wearing thin. "Valerie and her folks, they're on another level. I didn't want things to get awkward. I didn't want them to—" He trailed off, but there wasn't any need to finish. I knew what he meant. He didn't want me, his dad with work-roughened hands and old clothes, embarrassing him. He wanted no reminders of where he came from. I made it clear, affirming rather than questioning. "It's because of me, isn't it?" "Dad, it isn't like that," he tried to reason, but I pushed back. "Come on, Simon. You acted like I was some sort of embarrassment." "No, Dad, you're wrong," he insisted, and for the first time, he raised his voice. "We're done here, okay? What's done is done. Be mad if you must, but I'm through talking about it. I've got to go." "Wait, Simon," I pleaded, but the only response was the steady silence of a disconnected line. He'd already hung up. I just stood there, clutching the phone, hearing nothing but that empty buzz. I was motionless. After some time, I found myself sitting at the kitchen table. Hours passed. The coffee went cold. The sun moved across the room, shadows slowly shifting, and I remained there, replaying our conversation over and over. "You're always a complication. I didn't want them to see you. I'm done discussing this." Those words were a brutal confirmation of my worst fears, that my son felt embarrassment about me. It wasn't a simple slip or oversight. He intentionally left me out because I didn't fit into his sparkling new world. I was a relic of a past he wanted to leave behind. That night, I couldn't sleep. Lying in bed, eyes wide open, the conversation played non-stop. Then, like a gut punch, realization dawned. The growing distance over the past couple of years, the missed calls, the lukewarm visits. They weren't about him being too busy. He was laying the groundwork to fade me out, gradually detaching, so when he omitted me from his wedding, it was as if it didn't have any weight. It was deliberate, a scheme to edge me out without confronting why. This revelation, that he purposefully excluded me, was the deepest cut. Forgetting someone in a pinch is one thing, but being hidden because you're viewed as lesser is entirely different. This was when it became clear that something had shattered between us, beyond repair. Love can weather countless storms, but it falters under shame. When your own child looks at you through that lens, it's a kind of ending. I made a decision then, not to call or text. I didn't voice my grievances. The silence that followed was a change. No longer filled with longing and anticipation, constantly glancing at the phone, hoping for a message. Now, the quiet was something I claimed. I chose it, and in a surprising way, it restored a piece of my dignity. Time moved on. 1 week, 2 weeks. Simon never reached out. No effort to reconcile or make it right. During this period, I remembered something vital. The house. It was still mine. Early morning on a Tuesday, a newfound energy struck me, one I hadn't felt in ages. I rose, made a good strong coffee, and headed straight for the bedroom closet. Behind a pile of dusty boxes was the small safe Lucy and I had used for important documents. I pulled it out, put it on the bed, and entered the code. Simon's birthday, 2703. With a satisfying click, the safe opened wide. Inside were the vital documents: birth certificates, our marriage license, Lucy's death certificate, and at the very bottom, the deed to the house at Queen's Landing. My fingers shook as I pulled out the old, wrinkled paper. As I opened it, the words leapt out crystal clear, unfazed by the years. Title deed, it said. Owner, Thomas Duval, showing my ID number, my autograph, and the purchase date, March 12, 2015. That was nearly 10 years ago. I ran my fingers over the letters, each touch reigniting memories from the day I first put my name on it, the day I truly owned something of my very own. I scanned every line fervently, looking for Simon's name, any clue that I'd passed it to him, but there was nothing, just me. I found myself on my bed, clutching the deed. In that moment, it hit me. I never did officially transfer the house. Sure, I gave him the keys and said, "It's yours." But officially, it remained mine. It always had. As the sunlight crept across the floor, cars buzzed by outside, and a dog barked somewhere far off. Life kept going while I sat there holding that paper, pondering one of the biggest decisions of my life. Memories flooded back to me. Every brick laid with my sweat, every grueling hour worked, every dime scrimped and saved over the years to build that house. It was more than walls and a roof. It was my entire life's effort materialized, and I handed it to him, thinking I was offering him safety, love, and a future. But in reality, I had given him everything, only for him to show me it didn't mean a thing to him. I rose, slipped the deed into an envelope, and dressed in my best trousers and a clean shirt. Polished my shoes, combed my hair, and checked my reflection. The face looking back was different from the man who had cried silently for months. I was no longer the father begging for recognition. I just figured something important out. You don't beg for respect. You either earn it or reclaim it. If my son reckoned I didn't deserve an invite to his wedding, then he didn't deserve my most generous gift either. The house was coming back to me, not out of bitterness, but because I realized that giving without appreciation isn't love. It's self-destruction. At 9 sharp, I picked up the phone and dialed Mr. Ernest Miller, the local lawyer who had helped with Lucy's affairs. By the third ring, his warm voice answered. "Mr. Thomas, what a pleasure. How have you been?" I got straight to it. "I need to sell a property, right away." He paused. "Today? Mr. Thomas, these things take time. There's appraisals, listings, offers," he began, but I cut in, my voice steadier than I thought it would be. "It's urgent. Today or tomorrow, at the latest." There was a longer pause. "Is everything all right, Mr. Thomas? Did something happen?" "Yes," I sighed. "Something did happen, but I'll be fine. I just need your help to sell the house quickly." He asked me to come by his office at 11. Right on time, I walked in, envelope in hand. He poured me a coffee, which I took despite my hands shaking. He looked at me with eyes that had seen it all and asked, "Why the hurry?" I told him enough to understand, leaving out the wedding and the sting of my son's neglect. I explained that I wanted to sell the house still in my name, where my son lived, and it needed to happen fast. Mr. Miller nodded, understanding yet not judging, saying, "I'll make some calls. I know someone looking for a house in your area for his daughter. He might be interested." By 3 p.m., Mr. Miller rang back. "I've got a buyer, Mr. Thomas. He'd like to view the house first thing tomorrow. If he likes it, he'll pay in cash and can close the deal in 48 hours. My heart pounded. A cash offer. Perfect opportunity. A businessman wanting it for his daughter, who's marrying next month and eager to move quickly. I gave him the address, arranged a viewing at 8 a.m. the next morning. Then I settled on my couch, phone in hand, feeling like things were finally progressing. No turning back now. My decision was made, and inside, something that had been broken for so long began to heal. I barely got any sleep that night. It wasn't because I was anxious or uncertain. It was like a wild mix of nerves and a weird kind of calm. As I lay there, I kept going over everything that had led up to this moment, how I reached this point of having a son who seemed to take everything I offered for granted, and how love turned into a weakness when it's taken advantage of. I finally decided it was time to make a big move. "Hey, Simon," I said, trying to sound chill. "I've got something to tell you." I pictured him on the other end of the line, probably expecting a usual check-in or a casual catch-up. But this wasn't just any call. "You remember the house, right? Okay, so here's the deal. You need to find somewhere else to live in the next 2 weeks," I told him, keeping my voice steady despite the storm of emotions whirling inside me. There was a pause, a long silence, followed by the sound of him taking a sharp breath. "Wait. What do you mean, Dad? What's going on?" Simon asked, clearly caught off guard and not expecting to hear that. "I sold the house," I said, letting the impact of those simple words settle in. "I signed the papers today. You and Emily need to be out before the new owners move in." More silence followed. One of those silences that stretches on forever and makes two people feel like they're worlds apart. "But why, Dad? Why didn't you tell me?" His voice cracked, a mix of annoyance and disbelief. "I didn't say anything because you need to understand, Simon. Everything I've ever done was for you, but somehow it seemed like it was never enough. Now you need to learn what it feels like to handle things on your own," I replied, firmly but not angrily. I'd been silently supporting him for so long, but it was time he got a dose of reality. "I'm sorry it came down to this, but it's done," I added, my voice carrying a note of finality. I knew it sounded harsh, but sometimes a good shake-up is what it takes for someone to finally open their eyes. After I hung up, I stayed sitting on that park bench, watching the world go by. I felt mixed emotions, but a sense of regaining something valuable. Dignity, perhaps. It wasn't about revenge. It was about standing up for myself, getting some much-needed acknowledgement for all I'd done, even if it was in a way I hadn't imagined. Buying that house had been an act of love, kind of like when Mr. Mendes bought it for his daughter. But unlike my situation, I hoped this tough love would be the wake-up call Simon needed. And if not, well, at least I could say I'd done my part. Now it was his turn. "I need you to pack up and leave in 15 days, son," I told him, trying to keep my voice even. There was this stillness on his end. Confused silence. "What? What are you talking about?" "The house you're staying at, Queen's Landing. I need you out," I repeated. Silence. Then, "Dad, are you really serious? What do you mean by move out?" With my eyes closed and the sun warming my face, I finally said the lines I'd practiced so much. "I sold it this morning." Silence again. I could hear him breathing, trying to make sense of it all. I pictured his expression just before he yelled, "You did what?" His shout was so loud, it nearly made my eardrums burst. "Yeah, I sold the house, Simon," I reiterated calmly. "It was in my name. I just wrapped up the sale an hour ago." "No way. That can't be true. That's my house." Ah, there it was, the response I'd been waiting for. "No, son," I said, clear and firm. "It was never really yours. I gave you the keys and told you it was yours, but it was never legally in your name. Now, it belongs to someone else." I heard a sound on the line like he threw something in frustration. "Dad, that's my home. I live there with my wife. You can't just do this." "Your wife," I echoed, letting the words linger between us. "The woman I've never met. The one you married without inviting me. The one you prioritized over your own father." "Dad, this isn't about that." "It's absolutely about that, Simon. You cut me out of your life as if 40 years of raising you meant nothing, as if giving you a house didn't even warrant an invitation to your wedding." He was breathing heavily, and I could imagine him pacing, full of worry. "Dad, come on. Let's talk this over. We can figure it out." "I fixed everything I had to," I told him. "Deal's sealed, money's in my pocket, and the new folks are set to move in about 2 weeks." "You can't do this, Dad. he pleaded, his voice trembling with despair. Where are we supposed to live? And what do I say to Valerie and her family? I don't know, son, I answered gently, as casually as if mentioning the weather. You've got to find an apartment, save up for a deposit, and deal with lease renewals, just like I did for half a century. Maybe then you'll get the significance of that house I gave you. But the rent, he cried. We can't keep up. We just got married and Valerie's quit her job. We're on our honeymoon, for crying out loud. Well, cut it short and come home. Look for a place quickly. You've got 2 weeks. Have a good trip, son, I said, and ended the call. I turned off my phone completely, not just silenced it, but shut it down. I lingered on that park bench, bathing in the warmth of the sunset, feeling something new in my chest. Not joy, not sadness, but relief. I'd taken back my dignity, stopped begging for affection, and settled for the scraps. For about half an hour, maybe more, I sat there watching life go on, kids playing, pigeons foraging, while my own life flipped on its axis. Eventually I got up, headed to the bank, and put every cent into my account. It was rightfully mine, both legally and by the sweat of my brow. Now it was safely stashed away. After leaving the bank, I powered my phone back on. Immediately, it buzzed with energy. One missed call turned into 2, 5, 10, 20, 47, all from Simon with piles of texts. I read each one silently, not replying. Dad, answer the phone. We need to talk. You can't go through with this. Please call me back. Dad, I'm begging you. Don't take this the wrong way. Dad, pick up the phone. I'm desperate here. Valerie's in tears. Her folks want to speak to you. Dad, I'm pleading. I went through them all, felt nothing. Scratch that. Maybe a sense of satisfaction. Now he was hunting for me. Look who's seeking whom now, right? It was urgent. Suddenly, I mattered. But it wasn't love pulling him towards me. He needed something. I tucked my phone away and walked home. The stairs made my knees creak like always, but somehow I was lighter. Once inside, I paused in the living room. My tiny abode, my battered armchair, my rarely used kitchen, my simple world. And for once in ages it felt complete. I was enough. I didn't need my son to validate me. No fancy invites necessary. I didn't have to slot into his shiny life. I had my own, and it was dignified. At that moment, it was worth more than any grand house. Now, he reached out 47 times in 2 hours, not out of longing or newfound love. He felt I snatched something away. I flipped the script, and he felt the insecurity, fear, and loss I'd shouldered for years. Reality hit me. People come looking when they want something. If I was useful, I existed. When I stopped giving, when I halted silently sacrificing, when I finally put my foot down, that's when he stirred. But it was too late. Respect isn't reclaimed with pleas, it's earned with action. And I'd finally done it. Next morning at 8, the door took a beating. Not a casual knock, but angry and desperate. Thud after thud, like they aimed to break it down. I was in the kitchen, sipping coffee. I set the mug down and moved to the door. I knew who it was. I'd been waiting. I opened up to find Simon. Red eyes, disheveled, still wearing yesterday's clothes, the marks of a sleepless night and a hurried return from his honeymoon for this very moment. Anguish and desperation etched on his face. We need to talk, he said, barely holding it together. I stayed quiet, stepped aside to let him in. He rushed to the living room, pacing before me, fists clenched. How could you do this? He blurted, his voice shaking, on the edge of breaking. I closed the door, eased into my armchair, and stared at him calmly. My calmness only stoked his fire. I'm talking to you. How could you sell the house and not say a word? I calmly responded. How could I what? He seemed completely baffled. I couldn't hide my surprise as I asked, seriously, you went and got married without giving me a heads up? We just stood there for a beat, a heavy silence looming as he fumbled to respond. Eventually, he muttered, "It's different." I cut him off with a swift, "No, it isn't. It's the same thing." Simon ran his hand down his face, clearly exasperated. "Dad, what's done is done. But we can change this. Just call the buyer back, tell them you reconsidered, and return their money. There's still a chance." I looked at him closely. This was the child I had devoted my life to raising, the young man I thought I knew inside out. But at that moment, he felt like a stranger. "No," I said with determination. "What do you mean, no?" His voice rose in panic. "Dad, I don't deserve to be left homeless." "Nothing," I repeated, my tone leaving no room for argument. "Simon, you went ahead with your wedding, and you ignored me completely, as if the biggest day of your life had no room for me. You made me invisible, like I was not part of your world." He started to say, "It wasn't my intention to hurt you." "Exactly," I jumped in. "I didn't get an invite, not a single call, no explanations. It was like I didn't exist." He started pacing, looking extremely agitated. "It was Valerie. She was worried it would be uncomfortable. I'd be out of place." I spoke, my voice steely. "What did you think, Simon? Forget what Valerie thought. What about you? Did you ever want me there?" The silence was deafening. He looked down, his hands shaking as he barely whispered, "I thought it would just be easier this way." 5 simple words. That was it, plain and simple. There it was, laid bare, the full truth. And weirdly, for once, I didn't feel pain. The hurt washed away, replaced by a calming peace. It was, finally, the proof of everything I'd suspected. "It really is easier this way," I told myself again. "So much simpler to be erased rather than defended. Easier to be tucked away than celebrated. Safer for you to sidestep confrontation with your wife, to avoid standing up and saying, 'Dad deserves to be at my wedding because he's earned it.'" Simon met my gaze, tears welling up. "Dad, you found out about me selling the house faster than you did about the wedding." I jumped in. "Ironic, isn't it? I stumbled upon your wedding 2 days later on Instagram with a fake account I'd made just to catch a glimpse of your life. But the house? You called right away. See the difference?" He just stood there, tears streaming down his face, speechless. I spoke on, composed even though it surprised me. "I bought that house for you," I said. "It was the result of 40 years of hard work, every brick laid by me, 25 years of saving every single penny, every vacation I passed on, every little luxury I never had, all with thoughts of your future in mind, making sure you'd never have my struggles." My voice barely shook. "But still, you decided I wasn't good enough, that I was an embarrassment, that I didn't fit in with you and your wife's fancy circles. So I made the decision that you didn't deserve the house, because it was a gift born of love, and you've shown that you don't love me." "I do love you," he choked out, his voice cracking. "You're my dad. Of course I love you." I shook my head sadly. "No. You love what I gave you. You love the house that came at no cost to you. You love the sacrifices no one acknowledged. You appreciate having a father who asks for nothing. But me, the man behind it all, the one with the tired hands, the simple life, you don't love that man. You're embarrassed by him." "That's a lie," he shot back. "Then why wasn't I at your wedding?" I pressed on, my voice steady. "Why did you never truly introduce me to Valerie? Or when I was sick and alone, you just recommended some tea instead of visiting me?" I challenged him. Explain it all, without saying, "I was busy," or "It was easier this way." He opened his mouth, but no words came. We both knew there was no denying the truth. Simon sank into a chair across from me, face buried in his hands, sobbing. "Dad, I'm sorry," he pleaded through tears. "Please, forgive me. I messed up. I was a terrible son, but don't leave me homeless. Think of all the memories." I watched him, a man in his mid-30s, reduced to a childlike state. And I felt pity, a different kind, though. It was the type that comes when someone finally admits to their errors. I exhaled. I can't, son. Forgiveness is for genuine mistakes. What you did, it wasn't a mistake. I continued. This had been planned out over months, organizing a wedding, carefully leaving me out. I watched him do nothing as I went through hell. How can I just let that slide? But I'm your son, he argued, his eyes red and puffy. Your only son. I get it, I replied, nodding. But that house was the result of 4 decades of hard work, my only real possession, and I handed it over to you. But it was never enough. I was never enough for you. That's when I realized you weren't worth holding on to what I worked so hard to have. I got up, went into the kitchen, poured myself some coffee, and took a sip. When I came back, he was still there in the chair, looking defeated, tears silently streaming down his face. You've got 2 weeks to get out, I told him. If you need help with the move, just let me know, and I'll lend a hand. But it's finalized. The house isn't yours anymore. If I'm honest, it never actually was. Slowly, Simon stood up, like his entire body was weighted down. He gave me a look full of anguish and something darker. Was it hate or resentment? Hard to tell. At the door, with one hand on the handle, he stopped. Without even turning back, he said, I won't forgive you for this. I answered, That's all right. I wasn't planning on asking for forgiveness. He couldn't do it either, could he? Didn't give you any mercy? He just opened the door, walked away, and shut it gently behind him. And there I was, right in the middle of the living room, with my coffee in hand, bracing for emotions to rush in, guilt, regret, sorrow. But all that filled the air was silence, silence that felt light and liberating. And then, slowly, I felt something new, peace. I settled into my trusty old armchair, and for the first time in forever, took a deep breath that felt genuine. Regaining your self-worth can be a steep price, your home, relationships, family bonds. But let me tell you, it's absolutely worth it. Worth every tear, every hardship. Without self-respect, you're not really living, you're just getting by, pleading for love from those who don't acknowledge your value. I was worn out from pleading, feeling unnoticed, settling for scraps to dodge loneliness. The house is out of my hands now. In some way, my son's gone too. What I've got back, though, is me, reclaiming the self-respect I'd lost along the way. Sitting there, sipping on my coffee and gazing out the window, I felt truly satisfied. Not because I had everything, but because I decided I'd never settle for less than I deserve again. And that is beyond price. So, how would you handle it? If you were me, would you have let your dignity go along with the house? Or would you have chosen as I did? If my story stirred anything in you, anger, sadness, even just a slight relief, go ahead and leave a comment below and share your thoughts. Hit the like button if you believe I made the right decision, or tell me if you think I messed up. And don't forget to subscribe to William's Revenge Stories for more of these tales, stories of real people who finally said, enough, and took back what was rightfully theirs. Your support makes a difference because it reminds us we're not alone in this battle. That many know exactly what it feels like to be unseen by someone who should care.